All right. Well, we're going to do some gentle moves. This will be a focus on the fingers, wrists, hands, forearms. And we're going to start with a little forearms and knees positioning. After that, we're going to be on a seated position. So just a little bit to start us off on all fours. So I'm going to come up to my hands and knees, turn my toes under, and then instead of remaining on hands, let's come on down to the forearms. So you can see here, I have two blocks. They're on their flat sides. They're right in line with each other. What I'm going to do with this is come down so that these are in between my forearms. That's everything from the elbows to the wrists. Now, with your blocks maybe being an inch or so bigger or smaller than mine, and the length of our bones probably being not exactly the same, this might fill the space between your arms a little differently, meaning you might have more in the hands, or you might have some that goes past the elbows. And it's not terrifically important as to like what this covers, as long as you know that it's in the majority of your forearms. And we're going to start with our palms facing each other. And as you have this, I want you to walk your elbows and your palms in, so they're giving a squeeze onto the sides of these blocks. And as you have that for a moment, with those toes turned under, begin to sit your hips back so that you begin here to come into a deeper shoulder flexion. And we're not going to commit to it for a really long hold. So let's go ahead and come forward and then try it with your palms facing up. We're going to cycle through a few here. So toes turned under, hips move back. You can imagine here the shape of a downward dog. We'll come forward. From being on the backs of the hands, we're going to flip the palms facing down now. And if it feels like the blocks need to scooch around so you've got room, well and good, just push them around, palms facing down, and we'll sit on back. Let's cycle through those three. So back to palms facing in, and just a little sit back with the hips. Again, you could think about the shape of a downward dog. Just trying to pull the shoulders into a little more extension. And then we'll come forward. And then we'll go palms facing up. I think that's the order in which we did them. Apologies if it's not. We'll sit on back. And then we'll come in. And then we'll flip to palms facing all the way down. And again, just a little sit back. Let's go through one more cycle. So palms facing in. So you're resting on the pinky sides of the hands, sitting back. These blocks just act as spacers, pardon me, they act as spacers. So can you still squeeze in a little bit? Palms facing down. And again, you're like pushing in. And then we'll come back and then flip the palms all the way on up. And then sitting back. All right, let's go ahead and try one more thing while we're here. So you might need to look to see this. What I'm going to do is nudge these forward and again, adapt according to your props and your body. I want them as spacers between the arms. And I'm going to come to that palms down facing position. Now, I want you to catch on this one is that the corner of each block, the top corner of each block, is at the base of the thumb. So just at the thumb side of the wrist. And as I have this, I'm going to, again, press inwards with wrists and elbows. And then with my palms facing down, think of like a windshield wiper action. I'm going to keep my palms on the ground and I'm going to try to turn my hands apart. So I'm still hugging in with the elbows. I'm still hugging in with the wrists, but with my palms down, my fingers are now, instead of pointing straight forward to that wall ahead of me, pointing off to the side edges of my yoga mat. And then I'm going to come in. And I'm going to think here about, again, wrists staying close on the block, elbows staying close on the block, but turning the palms as though the fingers would point at each other. They don't get there exactly, at least mine do not. And as I kind of peer forward over this, I can see that the thumbs are almost coming to this front surface of the block. Let's try a few of these. So palms are down and you're going to open the space between the thumbs. That is to say, you're going to tip and turn the wrists and palms so the fingers point off to the sides, and then you're going to tip and turn and get those fingers to turn in towards each other. Well, this actually requires me to focus. I'm going to be quiet on the next couple. Squeezing the block and going through that wrist move. Mhm. All right, last one or two. Don't be discouraged by what you encounter in this. Be encouraged that you are working on it. All right, let's go ahead and sit on back for a second. We're going to do one more version of that. I'm just going to face the camera. It's a movement that doesn't get a lot of attention, like in fitness or yoga, but it's not this where the arms are turning to move the hands, right? You can see my arms are doing big motions. It's keeping those arms still and making a movement from the wrist. So it's a movement called deviation. So it means that your hand deviates from pointing straight forward. There's two kinds, radial and ulnar, referring to those two forearm bones. A little anatomy lesson there for you. So we did it with palms facing down. Let's try it palms facing up. I find this one really difficult. So as I come onto my forearms and knees, I'm going to here flip my palms up. And again, I want to catch the corners of the blocks at the pinky side of the wrist. And you know, tricky enough for people here is to actually bring the backs of their hands, the backs of their fingers, and the corners of the thumbs to the floor. So maybe we'll just take this as sort of the first edge of it. And you can look, and I might have to kind of lurch forward a little bit to see beyond that front of the block. And notice if you can, in fact, bring the exact backs of your hands down. Well, what about the backs of the wrists? Are you in a position where you don't quite have the ability to roll that thumb side of the hand down? Well, if you find that that's so, you're probably not the only one. As I've taught this in person before, in a group of people, I would see that a lot of people would really struggle with being able to get the forearm to turn the palm all the way up. For some people, it's a strength issue, but if you have something like an antique bone break in the forearm or wrist, or that you have some sort of less typical wrist formation in the bones, then you might just find this straight up impossible. But if it's a strength issue, good news, we're working on it. All right, so palms facing up. Oh, it's already burning. So let's try tipping the fingers apart barely, right? So it's like I'm trying to get my fingers to point off towards the sides of my mat. Wow, hard to do. And then can you tip the fingers so they point in at each other? And what you might find is that you can get greater success at this if those palms begin to roll in towards each other. But on this particular version, make what you can of having the palms face up. Did I call these gentle moves? Well, I'm not going to make it more complex than this, but I don't find the movement to be particularly simple to do. Oh, and I've got my right side on camera, which is my stiffer side. It's my stronger arm. It's the hand I recruit more often, right? So that's my right side dominant. Let's do a few more of these. So that's the hand that I hold my garden tools in. It's also the hand I would use when working on a massage client more often. All right, one or two more. I love this because it's like just so hard, but it's so approachable. Like there it is right in front of me. It's not part of a crazy yoga pose, but ooh, that's a lot of work. All right, let's go ahead and come out of that. If you ever want to work it in a different way, you could do this while seated at a table and have your hands on the table. But we're going to take a seat for the next portion of this. And I want you to feel free here to alternate your seat a few times. I'm going to start with a wide-legged position, just because I want to be able to lean to the floor ahead of me. If you are very limited while you sit on the floor, you could do this on a chair and take a second chair and face it in at you. So it's like you're seated on a chair and then you can lean forward to that support ahead of you. If you can join me on the floor, fantastic. And again, you could also do this to a tabletop. But I'm going to take a wide angle pose because I want to be able to access the floor. So the first thing we're going to do is have the palms facing up. That means thumbs are pointing out to the sides. And I'm going to bring the tips of my fingers to the floor. So middle finger's the longest. That one's going to get the ground first. And then if I push my hands forward, I'm going to get ring and first finger or index finger. And I'd have to push forward a lot further to get that pinky finger on the floor, but I'm going to try to work for that. If you find you get middle finger, index finger, and the ring and the pinky finger don't quite make it, that's not a problem. Again, this is not to diagnose pathology. This is just to move some body parts. So what I'd like you to be aware of as I do this that my palms are facing straight forward. I don't have my hands turning in. That's more common. I don't know that I've seen anybody turn out, but I'm open to interpretation of my words. So as I have this, I'm not trying to straighten my elbows and put my palms down, though that's another wrist and forearm thing we can do. But instead, my elbows are staying a bit bent, and I'm trying to bring my fingertips to the floor. Thumbs won't make it here unless maybe you've got really long thumbs. And you can see that my pinky fingers are kind of barely touching the floor. They sort of slip out to the side. So I'm gonna try to line them up more with their ring finger neighbors. We'll take a couple more breaths with this. Okay, so we've been on fingers, palms facing forward. If I drew a circle in the center of my hands, you would see that they're looking right ahead towards the camera. So from this, let's come out of that. Should you need a break, just do anything that feels simple for your hands, forearms, wrists, and shoulders. We're gonna go to that version with the palms coming down. So this time, once you catch those fingers on the floor, instead of committing to a slight bend in the elbows like we did earlier, I want you to straighten the arms and see if you can bring the root knuckles down and maybe the heels of the hands. And as you can see, maybe you might be looking at yourself, but the heels of my hands, at least in this first instance, do not get right down to the floor. So they're close. They'll get there maybe in a moment. I don't know. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I want you to notice things like, in order to get anything done, you turn your fingers out and your arms in. And we're going to endeavor here to kind of create a baseline read on this and see if we can have our fingers point straight back behind, straight back at you. And then notice if your thumbs aren't willing to participate, if they tuck and curl in. And we'll try to stretch those out towards the sides. Yeah, so straight arms here. I can feel my elbows beginning to bend. I'm gonna go for the straight arms, last few breaths. And then while you're thinking about the heels of those hands getting down, I don't think mine will today. And I'm really trying to keep this left thumb sticking out right thumb not tucking underneath my hand where it loves to hide. On the last phase of it, can you keep the heels of your hands down and bend your elbows any amount? So that's just going to increase the stretch from wrist to forearm. So again, it's palms towards the floor. Mine don't hit direct. Fingers pointing straight back instead of turning to the sides. And then we alternated between a straight pair of arms and then a bent pair of elbows. And you can see the difference between straight and bent is pretty small here. All right, and then let's come out of that. Everybody needs this hand, wrist, and forearm stuff. It's never top of mind for me. Like if I had to do my top 3 things, body parts, it'd be like left shoulder and upper back, neck, and then like a hip. My forearms and wrists would be like dead last on the list, unfortunately, but we're gonna give them a little care. All right, so from here, I'm on the floor. So at first I'll be kind of grazing the floor, but we're gonna work out a little bit. I've switched to cross legs. You're going to bring the fingers and the thumbs together. So it's like you're making these little bird beaks with your hands. Then as you have this, I want you to internally rotate and go back to your starting position. So we'll call starting position inner elbows, either pointing forward, or for some of us, they turn out to the side. And then as much as possible, you're gonna turn your arms in, and then begin to release. Maybe you're not feeling the but my left forearm is. And I'm gonna try this with a couple of different variable changes. I'm gonna do a few slightly forward. That feels different already. And again, the action here is internal rotation. That's a little less common in all the yoga poses that are commonly done and taught. Okay, I've done a few in a slightly forward position. I'm gonna go back a little bit here, heading towards that wall behind me. Ooh, different already. And then I'm gonna turn in. Oh, I like this one. And then we'll come back. And again, I've got fingers and thumbs pinched together. That's a little bit of busy work, but we're gonna change that in just a moment to see if we can add to what the forearms and wrists are doing here. All right, so one more time, turning in. with my arms here a little bit back. So I'm tapping that bolster that's beside me. Okay, so back to your starting position. Go to an internal rotation and you can decide, do you want that forward, out to the side, or even a little bit behind you? And then from here, you're gonna point your little bird beaks upwards. So you see how I've flexed my wrists. And then, just making sure I've got enough room, notice if that made you bend your elbows. And can you find a position where the elbows are straight, but your wrists are bent? I'm pausing because it's like, that's very interesting. Again, my forearms wouldn't be like my top 3 body parts that need TLC, but that just kind of proves the foolishness of trying to create a top 3 list. All right, so with your bird beaks pointing up, and again, you can work forward, straight on the side, or just a little bit back, cycle through a few. Can you take your arms out to the sides and just a little bit here, friends? So if you get to a point where it's like the arms come up and your next best move is scapular elevation, let's keep the shoulder blades down. All right, so I've done that. I've held it for a few breaths. I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna try forward. Again, internal rotation. I'm flexing my wrists. I'm trying to take my arms to the side. I don't feel like I've got a lot of room to move, but I am eliciting some interesting stuff. I'm gonna go a little bit back this time. This is feeling very asymmetric. You know, I don't look so crazy crooked on screen, I don't think, but it feels like this left arm is doing something very different than the right one. All right, and then let's bring that down. Shake that out. So that was like a sort of active range of motion of wrist flexion. Let's do an active range of motion for wrist extension. I teach this one a lot when I'm teaching things where we're going to be on the hands and knees, but it's a really excellent strengthener for the forearms. So I'm turning to the side just so you can catch this a little bit more easily without me hiding behind my arms. I'm going to start with my elbows together in front of my chest. Now, I've taught many students for whom this is not possible. So if it's just like you've got bulky arms, a bigger chest, feel free to go like above and into it. You don't have to start from around the chest. And if you can't get the elbows together, if there's some amount of space, you're in good company. Most of the time when I teach this, most students have some space between the elbows. The thought is, for a moment, can you get the elbows as close as possible? I'm just going to tip my camera angle a little bit so my hands don't end up off screen. Doing double duty these days as camera operator and yoga teacher. Okay, so you've got those elbows together, maybe, at least you're bringing them closer. Just feel where that resistance might come from. And then let's go ahead and release that. That's a little prep, a little warm up. You might recross your legs if you haven't done so already. And then this time, we're going to again have the arms in front, elbows as close as, but you're definitely going to get the heels of the hands together. So even if it looks like this, you're doing well. And I'm going to have this ahead of me rather than resting on my chest. I might go ahead of my shoulders, even a touch higher. And then as you work with this, you're going to peel the hands apart. I'll show you from the front in just a second. But you're going to check out here as you keep those wrists together. How far apart can you bring the hands? And again, if you're wide on the elbows, it's not problematic. It is just what your shoulders are capable of on this fine day. And I'm going in and out a few times here. So this is active range of motion for the wrists. Again, I pair this often in classes when it's like, we're going to be on the hands. So what sort of strength do you have for that? But it's a great standalone little therapeutic move. Ooh, all right, the next two, I'm gonna kind of back up my head. I might lower this down so I can see it more easily. And I'm just gonna watch the next couple and see if, spin to the front, I'll show you some common things. If one, they don't get very far apart, c'est la vie, but if in your struggle get them far apart, you flex and bundle your fingers up. So can you here keep those fingers straight? And then notice things like one goes way further than the other. If you've got a discernibly stiffer side, why don't you try that on for size a few more times? We'll just do a couple more. And again, unless you know you have like an old wrist break, forearm break, a funkily healed bone, wrist construction that's just different that you've encountered before, you might just be dealing with a strength issue, which be encouraged. All right, let's lower that one down. Again, I thought these were gentle moves. They're pretty gentle. Right. The last phase that I want to go through with you is to do some very distinct finger stretching. So we did a version on the floor. Here's a slightly more accessible version. So I'm going to start with my right palm facing up. And as I start this off, I think I'll go back to a wide-legged pose, just changing my seat a couple times here, keeping my hips involved. And when I work with this, I don't want to have that elbow backed up behind me, and I don't want to have it resting on the front of me. But most especially, can you keep your shoulders contented as you work with this? Now, when I teach this, people get very visual, like they look at it. I mean, I might ask you to look at it, but when you've seen what you need to see, can you then just see it in your periphery? So we'll start off by looking if that helps you visual learners. There are many of us. Palms facing up, elbows just along your sides. This right shoulder is not bracing for impact. This is a simple move. What I'm going to do is keep this palm facing up like I placed a ball or like an apple within it. But then I'm going to cross my right fingers with my left hand and pull those fingers down towards the floor. And as I work with this, I'm going to look again to create here a baseline. As I have this, can my palm just face straight on up? Imagine if there was that apple in your hand. Would it still be on the palm of your hand, or would you have flipped it over? And then once you have looked at this, can you simply look forward? You might be looking at the screen, you might be looking above or below or just through it, but get a sense for a few moments that if you need to see it, it's in your peripheral. And begin to sense and feel your hand, your wrist, your forearm, the stretch that you're eliciting out of this. And note that though it's not a big deal, lifting weights kind of strengthening move, the ability for you to keep your wrist straight, that is to say, the palm is still facing up, the apple is still in your hand, is a required strength and stabilization from the forearm. So it's no small thing. There are many times throughout the day when you are flexed in your wrist, in your elbow, in all your fingers. And so here, as you determinedly prevent that palm from falling down, you're getting some forearm strength. All right, that was a few moments. You can do the other side now. So I'm teaching this using all 4 fingers at once. So I've got my left elbow beside me. My left palm is facing up. I've placed my little apple in the center of my palm, and I know I'm not going to flip it over. And I'm starting visually. I like to see it to believe it, like a lot of yogis. So I'm going to start by looking. And then once I've gotten a sense that things are as I'd have them, I'm then going to look forward and trust that my peripheral vision will catch anything. But maybe more importantly, I'll sense things if they change. If you had more time to spare for this, and I hope you do, take me up on this suggestion sometime, you could, instead of going over all 4 fingers at once, work 1 finger at a time individually. And I'd recommend that for anybody who would identify with having some arthritis in their hands. We can't stretch away arthritis, we don't even try to, but we do keep suppleness in the soft tissues that support those bones and joints that have been impacted by that condition. All right, that's a couple moments there on the second side. Again, as you kind of clean this last side up with the last few breaths here, have you kept your left shoulder at ease? Have you kept your palm facing up? That's just to establish a baseline. Let's release that. And then I'm going to switch positions again. I'll come into Badakanasana, but I'm a little fussy about this pose. I'm going to use a pair of blocks. Your sitting position isn't the highlight, but if you're on the floor, I think it's nice to try on for size a few different positions. Cross legs is good, but it's not the only way to sit. All right, so let's do the thumb. I'm going to turn this out to the side so you might see a little bit better. I've got my thumb up, so thumbs up position. Same thought, elbow along my side, just to start with a baseline. And then from here, you can do this just facing straight forward. I want to go to the side so that you can see better. I'm going to encircle that thumb and draw back. So I'm imagining that my thumbnail is coming closer to this radial side, the thumb side of the arm. I'll do it facing forward. Oh, that's a good one for me. And the thumb can really kind of like circulate in a few different positions, but we're looking for one where we're drawing back on it. I feel that right up my forearm. I don't know about you. That doesn't mean it's, better than anybody else's. Just kind of reporting here what you might consider. And while you work with this, do you need to look at it? Once you've assessed it visually, can you simply sit and feel? And can you let those shoulders find that most appropriate place on your back? All right, let's hop on over to the other side. So I'm starting with a thumb up on the left. I'm encircling it in my other fingers and I'm drawing back like thumbnail towards the thumb side of the forearm. Again, I get that right up my forearm. And providing yourself with just a moment to see it if you need to, but once you've convinced your visual cortex that you are doing what you thought you were doing, could you subtract your eyes from that? And this is one of the ways that I want this to become what I call like a gentle move. I've provided you with some alignment. I've dropped in a little anatomy in here. But when we're really front brain and really trying to organize the practice, to me, it doesn't feel gentle so much. It's like my nervous system is being a damn perfectionist again. So as soon as I'm like, okay, satisfied, I did that, I followed the rules, I followed the instructions. After that, I want to know if I can get into the sensation of it. And not staring at it is helpful to me. It might also be helpful to you. All right, let's release that thumb down. And I've got one more forearm, wrist, and hand move for you. So I'm going to bring the backs of my hands together just to show you from kind of above. I'm going to very lightly cross my fingertips, just using that little crossing of the fingertips like a paper clip in the pose. And I'd like you to start off with your hands right underneath your jaw. Hands are at the top of your chest. And then see, and I kind of have to smush my face back to look because we are visual. Can you see if your thumbs connect? Or does one thumb kind of cover 2/3 of the ground and the other thumb can only get down the path about 1/3 of the way? And endeavor for a moment, keep your eyes on it. If that's how you're learning, can you get your thumbs closer and closer? And again, once you have seen it, can you then subtract your eyes from it so that there isn't this great urge and priority to organize this to the utmost? Some options for you. I want you to think about your elbows coming forward. So if you're one who hugs their ribs with their arms, this will kind of pull the hands apart. So we're allowing for internal rotation here, meaning elbows forward. When you internally rotate, are you like a lot of people? Do you also elevate your shoulders? That's very common. So as you're here, can you pull the shoulders down and bring those elbows forward? That unto itself is like interesting for my shoulders anyway. The next thing you can consider is drawing these hands down, further down your chest, away from your chin. However, if you've got things sealed together quite nicely here, like the backs of your hands are touching, the backs of your wrists are in contact, those thumbs are as close as they get, and then you opt to pull things down and everything spreads apart, I wonder if you could create that fine edge of progression, meaning keeping what you just put together and then challenging it that little bit. And we'll give this a few breaths. You could also go off center and you'd be flexing more into that wrist that you just went towards its side. So I shifted to the left. That means my left wrist is flexing more. That's acceptable to my wrist. If you feel like it's too compressive and not stretchy, you might want to stay centered. I'm going to go back to center and then I'm going to try out that right side. Oh, this is harder for me. And again, while you work with this, it's not that you want that elbow to fall down. We internally rotated the arm to create this shape. So we're not going to try to take that out. Again, internal rotation is just a little less common in yoga asana. We tend to pair this big, wide open, uplifted heart with shoulders and arms that fly back, which is delightful. But it's just an aesthetic quality. It's not necessarily functional. It's just one thing your body does. All right, back to center because I went off to the side. And then from here, I'm going to release. And then if you like a little shakeout, here it is. You can flap for a moment. What about a loose lacing of the fingers and then sort of cycling those hands around, just giving a little bit of swirly motion. If you go in one direction, you got to go in the other. Don't overthink it. All right, and then just take a few breaths and let your hands rest somewhere. Now they might feel worked because we did a whole bunch of stuff, but notice if they feel more spacious. And throughout the rest of this day, and maybe even tomorrow when you wake up after a night's sleep, can you be attentive to this and always repeat these exercises and lessons if they are feeling really potent to you? General suggestion is you don't have to do them every day, but what about every other day? If there's something about forearm stuff that you're like, I think I need that, repeat it again. And an important hand gesture for us yogis, Anjali Mudra. Thank you very much for signing on for this, and I hope it has been helpful.